Welcome to Party-Free. Today we are going to discuss about the universities of medieval Europe. The European University is a particular organization that emerged out of the conditions of medieval society. The collapse of the Roman Empire in the 5th century created a period of anarchy and economic crisis across Europe. The intellectual climate changed drastically, and large numbers of books and papers were lost or destroyed. The overall need for learned men fell in parallel with the decline of trade, economics, and local administration. Greek and Roman learning was preserved in Eastern Europe in the Byzantine Empire, and over time, Islamic scholars absorbed and spread the ancient texts throughout the Middle East. In Western Europe, the few surviving texts were scattered in monastery libraries. Over the centuries, many surviving ancient texts decayed into dust or were destroyed in wars and other disasters. Latin was the language of the monks, and the surviving texts were rewritten in abbreviated medieval style of Latin, often based on poor translations from Greek. Over time, the curriculum of medieval learning became set based on large compendiums of simplified Greek knowledge compiled by encyclopedists such as Boethius. In the 11th century, new contact with the East in the form of the Crusades helped to recover lost ancient knowledge. While the Crusades were mainly destructive and religious-driven wars, there were some positive outcomes for European society. Western scholars came to realize that Islamic intellectuals had a storehouse of ancient learning wider than their own. On the other hand, European economics and politics slowly began to develop, and the growth in trade and government administration saw an increased need for literate and numerate scholars. The survival of ancient texts in Western monasteries had made them the focal points of medieval learning. The cathedral schools, especially those in capital cities or at pivotal trade routes, began to grow with the slow rise of trade and economic stability. These became centers for copying the new texts recovered from the East. The word university originates from the term universitas, which originally meant any collection of professionals in a guild or organization. The motivations behind these corporations were to provide their members with protection from rival groups and enable price regulation and monopolies. Over time, the term became narrowed to mean strictly a society of academics. There is some debate among scholars about which particular place can be called the first university. The medical school at Salerno in southern Italy is often cited as the first university, or at least one of the first universities. It was also a meeting place of Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Jewish learning, being a port situated on important trade routes. It became a universitas sometime in the 12th century and obtained formal recognition in 1231, but remained solely a medical school. The universities that was to inspire the majority of other institutions in southern Europe was Bologna. The Italian town had a law school of great renown which attracted students from all over Europe. Near the end of the 12th century, the foreigner law students at Bologna formed a union to provide protection from local customs and laws. Students, it was discovered, were a vital part of the local economy, and so they could demand better treatment or take their money elsewhere. To keep the students at Bologna, they were granted cheap rent, food and taxes, as well as exemption from military service and the right to set teaching fees. In Paris, at around the same time, the teachers of that city formed themselves into a corporation, a universitas magistrorum. Students in Paris tended to be French, but their teachers were often foreigners and so organized themselves for protection and mutual benefit. Students were allowed to join the guild as junior members, and if they passed their examinations, could slowly advance up the corporate hierarchy. Paris was the model that later Northern European universities followed. Universities began to spread across Europe. Often disputes within a university led to migrations of teachers and students and the formation of new universities. Migrations from Bologna led to the founding of Padua in 1222. Further moves from Padua led to the creation of a university at Vercelli in 1228. Some historians claim that up to half of the universities of medieval Europe originated from such disputes. Universities also sprung up seemingly on their own, although usually following the organizational principles of either Bologna or Paris. By 1500, there were 62 recognized universities in Europe. The fortunes of universities were closely tied to the towns they existed within or near. Many famous schools, such as Oxford and Cambridge, were founded at busy commercial centers. There was often conflict between the town authorities and the academic guilds. Many riots occurred in the early history of universities, referred to as town versus gown battles. One of the questions at stake was who had legal authority over academics. Over time, it became accepted that scholars could not be arrested or tortured by the town authorities except for murder. In effect, universities became independent entities with their own code of conduct and discipline. In the early universities, lectures were usually held in the master's room or a hired hall, as these universities owned no buildings of their own. Classes consisted of a master reading aloud and commenting on an established text, while the students copied down the lecture word for word. This gave the students both the original text and a learned commentary on the work. The use of Latin as the academic language meant that academics could study and teach in any European country. University students and teachers were very mobile, often traveling to several institutions in their careers, and helped create a European-wide sense of learning. Universities taught the 7 liberal arts and at least some of the advanced topics of theology, law, medicine, and philosophy. Many universities began to include practical courses in response to public demand. Courses in the art of letter writing trained the clerks, money counters, and administrators of the flourishing economy. However, the era of growth did not last, as the 14th century was beset with famines, disease, and war. The conflict that came to be called the 100 Years' War disrupted trade, and the plague known as the Black Death killed approximately a third of Europe's population. The universities continued as well as they could, although many were forced to suspend classes for extended periods. These disruptions had wider social implications, for while the 12th century had been a time of expanding intellectual horizons, particularly with the influx of Arabic and ancient knowledge, the university curriculum now became fixed and rigidly taught. By the 16th century, many critics regarded the universities as places of backward, unimportant studies. University academics were accused of following their ancient sources too closely while ignoring the dramatic changes in European religion, politics, economics, and wider discoveries of the world. Yet the universities survived and even flourished, for social changes had once again increased the demand for educated men to fill positions in commerce and administration, and the universities held a monopoly on higher learning. This is the end of our today's discussion. Subscribe our channel, like our video, and comment. Listen to our podcast episodes. Follow our official Facebook page, Twitter handle, and Instagram. For any query, feel free to mail us. For details, see the description.